Buenos días. Vamos a dar inicio entonces a la última jornada de esta 14ª Conferencia Regional sobre la Mujer. Es una mesa redonda que mira hacia el futuro, titulada Desafíos de las políticas para la igualdad de género, que va a ser moderada por la secretaria ejecutiva de la CEPAL, la señora Alicia Bárcena.
Buenos días y realmente un gusto iniciar esta última jornada de nuestra conferencia, de nuestra 14ª Conferencia Regional de la Mujer, y un honor realmente poder moderar este panel tan importante. Yo quiero decir que tenemos con nosotros un panel de lujo, y en primer lugar quiero saludar a la señora Marta Lucía Ramírez, vicepresidenta de Colombia, porque en realidad nos honra su presencia, porque ella va a hacer una intervención especial seguida de un debate de panel, y luego vamos a abrir a todas ustedes y todos ustedes para que haya un debate abierto. Y quiero decir que es un honor, porque esta conferencia nos ha otorgado, señora vicepresidenta, la invaluable oportunidad de escuchar las voces de las mujeres de nuestros países, de nuestra región, pobladoras, dirigentes sociales, políticas, mujeres indígenas, afrodescendientes, migrantes, jóvenes, mujeres con sueños y anhelos de un mundo más justo, más igualitario, un mundo en que la igualdad de género sea una realidad. Así es de que esta conferencia es un hito muy importante de un largo camino que hemos venido recorriendo desde hace 43 años, cuando fue la primera conferencia en La Habana en 1977, que se acordó este primer plan de acción regional para la integración de la mujer en el desarrollo económico y social de América Latina. Y ahí es donde ustedes mandataron a la CEPAL justamente para ser la secretaría de esta conferencia, y así lo hemos hecho con mucho orgullo y con mucho, yo diría, dedicación, porque nos parece que es uno de los espacios más importantes que tenemos en la región. Desde entonces hemos vivido muchos cambios en lo económico, en lo político, en lo social, en donde ha habido avances por un lado, pero también ha habido persistencia de las desigualdades. Hemos sorteado muchos obstáculos desde ese inicio en La Habana y hemos, creo, generado conjuntamente un proceso excepcional en el mundo entero, la verdad. Y creo que es por ello que tenemos una gran responsabilidad de mirar hacia el futuro, porque hoy la realidad que vive nuestra región nos interpela y nos compromete a avanzar con paso firme hacia ese fin de las desigualdades, y gritando con fuerza que requerimos esa autonomía de las mujeres y esa autonomía económica de las mujeres. Así es de que queremos mucho más, y creo que ese es el motivo principal de este panel, porque todos los que estamos aquí de alguna manera hemos tenido la oportunidad de ejercer nuestros derechos a estudiar, a trabajar, a participar en nuestras sociedades en las que crecimos, y creo que esto ha sido lógicamente gracias a la lucha de miles de mujeres que nos han antecedido, pero también hay miles de mujeres que no han tenido esta oportunidad, y por eso este panel creo que nos va a otorgar esa oportunidad de ver ¿qué sigue? ¿Qué es lo que viene después? En la autonomía económica de las mujeres lo hemos analizado aquí, sin duda sobreponernos y poder lograr avances importantes en la formalización de la economía del cuidado, el reconocimiento del trabajo no remunerado, lo hemos dicho, la inclusión financiera, pero ¿qué más? ¿Qué más? ¿Qué nueva generación de normas, leyes, iniciativas que nos permitan realmente ir más allá? Y por eso para mí es un honor presentarles a Marta Lucía Ramírez, porque además de ser la primera vicepresidenta de su país, la primera mujer que ocupa este cargo, ella fue ministra de Comercio Exterior entre 1998 y 2002. Y la verdad es que eso le da una visión muy importante, que ayer estuvimos conversando, de cómo las mujeres hoy tienen que insertarse en este mundo global, por un lado, en este mundo del comercio, en este mundo, pero con igualdad y con una serie de elementos que le permitan realmente avanzar. Creo, Marta Lucía, que para nosotros es de verdad un honor tenerte con nosotros, porque además de que eres una abogada muy reconocida en tu país, has sido senadora, fuiste también ministra de Defensa de Colombia, o sea, has ocupado cargos de enorme importancia y creo que para nosotros el que tú hayas decidido venir a nuestra conferencia, especialmente llegando ayer, irte hoy para participar con nosotros, es un verdadero honor porque creo que desde tu cargo de vicepresidenta en la historia de Colombia nos puedes ayudar mucho a avanzar en la lucha contra la corrupción, la igualdad de género y todos los temas que tú estás tan adecuadamente llevando en Colombia. Así es de que para mí es un honor darle la bienvenida a Marta Lucía, ofrecerle la palabra como keynote speaker de esta ocasión y después ya invitaré a los panelistas a comentar. Así es que Marta Lucía,
bueno,
the floor is yours y bienvenida.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Yo quiero decir que para mí realmente es un honor y es un gran compromiso estar acá con todas ustedes, con tantos organismos y con tantas personas que han venido trabajando durante muchos años por esta causa de la equidad de género. Quiero saludar muy especialmente a nuestra huésped, a nuestra gran amiga Alicia Bárcena, que nos ha convocado y su capacidad de convocatoria también es reconocida internacionalmente. Felicitaciones, Alicia, por esta nueva reunión, la 14ª Conferencia Regional de América Latina y el Caribe sobre la equidad de género. Saludar también a nuestra gran amiga María Noel Baeza, directora regional para las Américas y el Caribe de ONU Mujeres. Hemos tenido oportunidad ya en el pasado también de compartir esta visión que tenemos sobre una mujer latinoamericana y caribeña con muchísimo más empoderamiento y más desarrollo. Nuestra ministra de la Mujer acá de Chile, Isabel Pla, también nuestra anfitriona, gran amiga, gran líder acá en Chile por esta causa de las mujeres y de la democracia. Saludar a la presidenta del Instituto Nacional de Mujeres de México, Nadine Gassman, como le decía también. Tenemos una extraordinaria embajadora mexicana en Colombia que montó ni más ni menos que el Museo de la Mujer en México y estamos siguiendo esa iniciativa ahora en Colombia. Vamos a hacer todo el esfuerzo para tener también el Museo de la Mujer en Colombia. Saludo al viceministro de Igualdad de Oportunidades del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, Óscar Urquizu, viceministro. Éxitos en esa tarea tan difícil que están haciendo ustedes para recuperar a plenitud la democracia y darle el progreso que Bolivia merece. Saludo al director de Institutos de Género de la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe, la CEPAL, Mario Castillo, a la coordinadora de la Red de Organizaciones No Gubernamentales de Trinidad y Tobago para el Adelanto de la Mujer, Hazel Brown, a Ana Guesmes, también la representante de ONU Mujeres en Colombia, a María Ángeles Durán, socióloga y doctora en Ciencias Políticas del Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas de España. Saludo también a la doctora Gina Magnolia Riaño, secretaria iberoamericana para la Seguridad Social. ¿Cómo hablar de equidad de género con tantas mujeres en el mundo sin seguridad social? Porque el tema de la economía del cuidado se ha recargado sobre las mujeres, negándoles la posibilidad realmente de ocupar una parte muy importante de su vida productiva, teniendo realmente ese cuidado por su futuro una vez que llegan a la edad madura. Saludo a los funcionarios de nuestro gobierno, en primer lugar a nuestro embajador acá en Chile, el doctor Alberto Rendón, a su señora Claudia, a su hija Susana. Cuando uno encuentra un embajador de Colombia en el exterior y viene principalmente a este tema de género, pues siempre es una felicidad enorme encontrar que tiene 2 hijas y que esta causa de las mujeres también lo compromete a él en este trabajo bilateral que está haciendo ante el gobierno de Chile. A nuestra consejera presidencial para la equidad de género, la doctora Heidi Maricela Gallo. Ya tuvieron ustedes oportunidad de compartir aquí con ella ayer todas las iniciativas, los programas que estamos desarrollando y me voy a referir a ellos. A todas ustedes, las mujeres, las secretarias de género en los distintos países, las jefes de las delegaciones en esta 14ª conferencia, pero especialmente quiero saludar a través de ustedes a todas esas redes de mujeres, a las redes de mujeres que han venido trabajando por la causa social de las mujeres, las redes de mujeres indígenas, las redes de mujeres afrodescendientes, de mujeres rom, de mujeres de todas las etnias y condiciones, esas redes de mujeres que desde hace muchas décadas, siglos obviamente, han trabajado por la igualdad de la mujer, por abrir un espacio para la mujer y a esas redes de mujeres que hoy, en el presente, siguen dando esta lucha para decir.
Right now, we must devote much more efforts, many more efforts to push ahead the cause for the big chunk of women, more than 50% of women who, as Christine Lagarde, when she was director of IMF, and recently Kristalina Georgieva, because the gender cause is not just something having to do with ethics, it is a need. The whole world needs to include women. The inclusion of women into the economy of the planet is needed to reach further growth and scientific technological development. We need to involve more women in all fields. Thus, because of this, for Colombia, the full implementation of Beijing platform and all of the strategies behind the 2030 agenda become indispensable, not only for the policies of our countries, but also for the development of the Colombian society. It's an agenda that we look at every day, trying to get the private sector to own and to champion this agenda as well. 25 years after Beijing, 20 years after the 1325 resolution, and by the way, a few days ago in Colombia, we received Ambassador Swanihan. She's the ambassador who pushed ahead that 1325 resolution towards the Security Council of UN. We are now noticing how after 20 years, a women's role have become much stronger in world security, in peace agreements, and in implementing agenda towards security and peace where gender is involved. We now have 7 million inhabitants in the world, and billion, and more than half are women. And of these, 332 million women in Latin America and in the Caribbean here. That means that our region has the obligation to work for 10% of the women in the planet. Thus, we must get all international organizations, Ibero-American, hemispheric organizations with a concrete agenda. Alicia and everybody here, I am concerned because we often attend different conferences, and there are so many statements, declarations, discourses, political and discourses, but very few concrete agendas with concrete measurable goals with short, midterm, and long-term objectives. We have really a short period of time to correct this tremendous inequality that affects so many women throughout the world. We very well know that in the last few years, after Latin Americans' recovery at the beginning of this century, we're now noticing how during the last few years, poverty is on the rise. In Latin America, went from 27.8% poverty up to 30.8%. And we know that poverty affects, most of all, women and young people. Therefore, this monetary inequality that women face is added to the large amount of time that women must devote to the care economy, to their children, to care for their older parents, and often their in-laws, because the women are the ones that take up this commitment. It's not a burden, it's a commitment. And this means that we also have a systemic failing how to reach a new culture that would get men involved in this kind of care. In many countries, we hear now about new masculinity. I don't really know what is the appropriate term, but we must realize that there's a new idea on what should be the commitment of men within the family. both men and women should share these chores and tasks, as well as the opportunity that women should have to reach economic autonomy with new jobs. We all know that nowadays, with the rise of poverty and with the slowdown of the economy, the world economy suffered last year. According to IMF, the economy this year will grow no more than 1.8%. In Latin America, the growth will be of 0.1%. In Colombia, we're pretty satisfied because we'll grow at about 3.2%. Comparing to 0.1 of Latin America and 1.8 for the world, we have positive figures, but this is certainly not enough. Colombia, such as Colombia, must grow at least at 4.5%. And this is something that we should achieve in all our countries. Alicia and I mentioned that we're going through times when we must reinvent many things. Amongst others, we must reinvent capitalism. We must have capitalism, yes, but an inclusive capitalism, one that is geared towards including everyone as owners, all men and women as a business, men and women, with companies that are sustainable, scalable, and profitable. And here, capitalism, I think, should give new room for business women. We must get more women to be a part of the economy, a businesswoman. And we also must realize that in this inclusive capitalism, we must rethink of new models, such as, for example, solidarity economies, this cooperative system that in some Asian countries have shed excellent results, even in some European countries, such as, for example, Holland with its agriculture. There are excellent results, and we must think about Latin America and how to include women, especially rural women, as business women through an inclusive capitalism. And this could be done through a system of cooperatives where women may have economic security and more social development. We have to really strive hard so that these organizations may bring in diagnosis so that we may share our concerns and also our accomplishments. In all of the studies of smart economics, we read that we must create new conditions for the effective inclusion of women in our economies. This comes from the reality that Acuña says that we heard, that to close down the gaps, we would have to wait for 257 years. But this is unacceptable. We cannot be complacent and passive to wait for 250 years to go by to get all women to become part of the economies and to narrow down, to close down the inequality gap. We have tremendous work to do. In Colombia, let me say, Alicia, I'm here not because I wanted to do a protocol or to be part of the protocol and be a part of this conference. No, I came here because I'm a VP that came to that position receiving votes. Together with the President of the Republic, we made previous work competing with each other, and we participated in the primary elections. And my votes were added to his votes, and thus we were able to win with the great majority. But that is why I'm telling you that I'm a VP that came to my position with concrete responsibilities. I'm not waiting for the president to step down. No, I want to supplement with my job so that we may, in this administration, have positive results. And one of the things that I've brought here has been the counselor's office under the presidency for women. So we have many men, but the advancement of women hasn't been that positive. So for me, being the first woman vice president doesn't mean just being proud. It means that I have tremendous responsibilities. I have the first VP that was elected, but the woman that must take up the responsibility on behalf of all Colombian women, so that after our administration, we must change the conditions of women in Colombia. That is why the work that's been conducted by Hedy Gallo, our president counselor, has been working from the onset to achieve concrete results in many fields. That is why we're satisfied. After 1 year in office, Colombia has risen 22 points in gender equality from the World Economic Forum. We are ranked number 18 right now, and this is due to many things. First of all, we started with President Ivan Duque, who luckily is a young man, extremely intelligent, well-prepared man with a modern idea on what should be women's roles. And he is committed towards the true gender equality. And that is why when to set up our cabinet, we said we wish to have a cabinet with parity. We started with 50% women in charge of ministries. Right now it's not 50. We now have 60% of our cabinets and state ministers are in the hands of women. But this is not because of the quotas that are needed. We're not here because of that. No, all of the women in the cabinets are there because of their competency, knowledge, experience, technical training, and they are in ministries that are no minor thing. We have a woman ministry for energy, another in charge of transport, another Minister of the Interior, another woman who is the Minister of Justice, and another for Sciences, Technology, and Innovation, another in the Labor Ministry and in Education.
So it is knowledge and experience that has brought them there, but above all, a cabinet where 100% of these portfolios have an obligation, as indicated to the president, to have public policies and programs allowing us to move toward that true gender equity. And that is why the men in the cabinet, the Minister of Foreign Trade and Industry, is committed to have programs to include entrepreneurial women, far more women in entire free trade agreements, and include exporting women. The Minister of Agriculture, who's also a man, has been an extraordinary collaborator to our agenda program. I asked him to make a compact for rural women, and all rural associations in Colombia signed the compact. What is it about? That each sector of rural production, coffee, cocoa, fruit, palms, all sectors of production, or including animal protein and of different types, and poultry and pork, all include women as businessmen, as the owners of farms. In Colombia, you know, we have a major coffee production, 560,000 coffee-growing farms, and of these, 140,000 that are owned by coffee-growing women. We want to increase that share, but we would like this to be reproduced in all sectors of Colombian rurality, because using women in the countryside, this is barely a first step that we should take. First of all, to put an end to violence in the fields, but second, overcome the poverty and violence that affects rural women so badly. And third, to put an end to violence and drug trafficking that has focused so badly on rural areas. That is why I am truly proud to say that we are progressing in gender equity, but with commitments and a lot of pressure on the entire government in this regard, because we know that it is only the quality of the programs, the concrete outcomes that may be quantifiable, will allow us to say the first woman who went through the office of the vice presidency contributed to this change. We're not here for the pictures or tributes or red carpets. No, we are here to work for the cause. for a fairer society, more inclusive, more equitable, and above all, for the cause of Latin America, where we can truly make the most of our full potential, because it is unacceptable otherwise, the world of Latin America and the world, a continent with natural resources, with human resources, with culture, a tremendous diversity that is misused in Colombia today, that we are so committed to, for example, biodiversity. And recently we had a science and technology and innovation mission. We determined that bioeconomy should be the main pillar and the driver of growth in Colombia in coming years. It is there that women have a very relevant role to play as scientists, as also women who are involved with the environment, women in the development of renewable energy. And I would like to end by saying that here we must create networks of women to share experience, but above all, put more pressure on our governments on concrete outcomes. Networks of women in ICTs, networks of women for employment, networks of women or entrepreneurial women. And that is why we've also brought to this conference a proposal to create a network of business women in Latin America and the Caribbean to share their knowledge, to share their experience, and may mentor women who are in the first places in the financial sector, manufacturing, that they are able to mentor SMEs owned by women. We were talking yesterday with Alicia that we must make the most of free trade agreements held among our countries. And many of these FTAs are related, for example, to the U.S., where there are rules that favor women-headed companies for government procurement. So what are we saying? And I say we saying to share the opportunities for women-headed enterprises among our countries. If the legislation of our countries benefits SMEs headed by women, and if in those FTAs there are clauses for national treatment, we must make sure that the women-headed enterprises throughout the region should benefit from free access to markets among our countries. So it is through this network of women, of economic growth, economic empowerment of women, the political empowerment of women, we must make sure that women can access politics, not because they are doing it through a party, not because they are part of a client-based system in a particular party, but because they come to politics, because they have trained in state management, because they know how it goes, because they come to the state with a vocation to serve, with a vocation to transform society. And that is the only way, with economically empowered women, with politically empowered women, that we too will be able to set right this violence against women, because that is no minor issue. In the hemisphere, household violence, sexual violence, harassment, violence against children, sexual violence against children, often produced even by their own parents. This is a form of violence that we must address with women that have far more character, determination, empowerment, autonomy, and above all, state protection of society. And so, Alicia, thank you very much for opening up this space. I do know that through our presidential counselor, all of the programs that you are carrying out and us, we will be able to join them all in towards this major cause to ensure that these almost 30 million women in Latin America and the Caribbean may have a decided impact on economic growth and higher levels of progress, and above all, the greater ability to do things, changing the society based on knowledge. Our emphasis in changing the education system and including women in systemic courses. There are far more women in the area of maths and science, technology, which enables our girls to aspire tomorrow to be businessmen, to be people who can set right a good part of the asymmetries are affecting our continent. And in all of this, I repeat the role played by ethnic groups, indigenous women, women who have so much ancestral knowledge that they can contribute to the development of our countries. And so, this organization, this ECLAC conference that has reflected so much on economic and social development that both go hand in hand, is the best place for our reflections to deal to a much tighter and ambitious agenda with far more concrete goals, because we know that we're putting pressure on governments to ensure that the whole of Latin America may have parity cabinets, that the entire Latin America may have a gender institutionality reflected not only at national government level. Thank you. And that Latin America as a whole has a gender institutionality going from the national level to territorial level. Our cause that we are embracing today is not easy. We need to convince each mayor in each town of Colombia to also have a parity cabinet. Not easy because they're not obliged to do it. There's no rule that obliges them to do that. Sometimes this is not even the matter of quota laws, but rather persuading them and how the role of women in rural areas, very faraway places, may change reality in these municipalities and departments. So let's get to work. Let's get all of these sustainable development goals. In the case of Colombia, it is the SDGs that served as a guiding pillar for a national development plan under President Iván Duque. All goals are included in the development plan. And that is why this is the first time that we not only have a woman vice president and a parity cabinet, this is the first time that gender equity is an independent chapter in the national plan for development in Colombia, and we're hoping that this is here to stay forever. Not with a view to 2030, but forever. Gender equity is the only way that we will achieve the true progress for Latin America, and I'm sure the true progress for entire humanity. When women all are recognized for their capacities, and when women all may contribute to economy, to science, to knowledge, worldwide, undoubtedly, we will have a humanity with greater well-being, a humanity that's more peaceful, and above all, a humanity far more respectful of the humanity and decency of each person. Thank you. Thank you, Vice President. Very relevant what you have said, because we here in these days have reflected that the economic model is depleted, and it is depleted on account of the lack of inclusion. Yes, and the truth is, we have said this on several occasions, we must look for a new path, a path where, as you have well said, what we need is for women to be fully included with autonomy, because that is what will give us true emancipation, to fully be part of the design of future paths towards growth, development, trade, inclusion. The approach of women is always progressive, comprehensive, deep, inclusive. So thank you very much. And we're going to pick you up on what you said, because you have very specific experience in the area of trade. And you didn't mention this, of the 75 girls that have been analyzed in depth, and of analyzing not only the barriers in each productive sector, but also how many women are taking part in each sector. And this helps us a lot as ECLAC, Because when we analyze the input-output system, we need to set this up in the region. We need to know how many women are taking part in the value chain, and hopefully more and more in the upper part of the value chains. And so we're going to pick you up on that. Your experience is relevant in these matters that you are carrying out, specifically in Colombia. So thank you, Vice President. It is a true honor. And I would also like to welcome Minister Pla, who was attending some interviews, and immediately recognize Nadine Guzman, compatriot, president of the National Women's Institute of Mexico. As you know, she's a physician, a doctor in health policies and management. So if you have any difficulty, here's Nadine to help us. And she also took part. If anyone has a cold or whatever, yes. And also I would like to say that she was the representative of the Population Fund in Guatemala. So Nadine has had several very important experiences in Guatemala, in Brazil, in Mexico, part of this campaign of join in to put an end to violence in Latin America and the Caribbean. I believe that in Nadine, we have an activist today at government level, for which I'm very pleased, former representative of UN Women. Yes, so dear Nadine, I think we all know you. We appreciate you. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Alicia. It is a true pleasure to be here today. I had forgotten that I was a physician, yes. But yes, I am also a physician, that is true. I would like to begin on this last day of the conference, which has been so intense and relevant. I'd like to begin recalling that we are in 2020, commemorating that 75 years ago, women, Latin American diplomat women, included to the UN Charter an explicit mention of equality among men and women. It was Minerva Bernardino, Amalia del Castillo Ledón, Berta Lux from the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Brazil, who truly put up this topic. And here we are, 75 years later, in another world where this is still being discussed, is still being constructed, but it is no longer questioned. We should also recall the first conference, with the CEDAW mandate in the City of Mexico. And at the end, I will also talk about the Equality Forum to be held right there at the same place of the first conference. And I think that we should wrap up here, recognizing that here we stand with many challenges ahead, but we have all of these marvelous women who've helped us to pave the road since Beijing, Samajina, Tilia, Luz, and Mara Hazel, and also celebrate that Alicia is the first woman to head ECLAC, and you've given ECLAC a different face. An ECLAC that speaks of equality constantly, and that is helping us to think of how to transform the region. We're also here with Maria Angeles and feminist economists, and who have transformed the economy and the way of thinking of the economy. And so now it's up to us to really change it. And I think that this week has been a week of hearing the challenges that we face in the region. This region that, as the Vice President and Alicia said, does not grow. the pace when around the world, just to locate myself in Mexico, we've committed to not leaving anyone behind and not leaving anyone out. So, as Alicia said, this calls on us to think systematically and to act with a sense of urgency in order to transform the economic model and devise comprehensive public policy stemming on the reality and needs of women, involving them, engaging them, recognizing their diversity. In Mexico, within the framework of the government of President López Obrador, that every morning reminds us that we are embarked on a process of profound transformation, that we're involved in a change of regime. As an example of this panel on comprehensive policy, based on the National Plan for Development, a development plan that makes or proposes to transform the economy from growth to well-being, and that places at the heart the need of the poorest. And at the National Institute of Women, we devised the National Program for Equality Among Men and Women 2019-2024. This program was devised listening to the voices of women in each of the 32 federative units. We listen to women, indigenous women, Afro-descendant women, women with disabilities, young women, rural women, grassroots women, urban women, activists. And the truth is that after hearing almost 5,000 women, we picked out 3 things that women want. 1, to have their own income and resources. They want to be able to work, to make a living, to have social security, to have autonomy, economic autonomy. And they also said to us very clearly that for that, they needed a national caregiving system. They needed to be able to go to work calm, at peace, knowing that their dear ones, girls and boys, elderly people, people with disabilities, ill, were being well cared for and safe.
The third thing we heard is that they wish to live without violence, but with safety, feel safe. Evidently, many other things were said. Health, well-being were also important issues. But it was as of this when we had a very positive dialogue with more than 40 federal government's offices saying, hey, this is what women are saying. What will you do in terms of public policy to respond to these needs? And that's the content of Pro-Equality. Pro-Igualdad has been built over this dialogue that was mediated by the Institute with all of the women in their own diversities and government offices. The 6 goals, objectives of the program are to leverage women's autonomy, to close historic gaps of inequality, create the necessary conditions to recognize, reduce, and redistribute household labor and care of individuals between families, state, community, and the private sector, improving the conditions so that women, girls, and adolescents may have access to well-being and health without discrimination, with a rights focus, fighting all types of violence against women, girls, adolescents, maintaining their integrity, positioning equal participation of women in decision-making in political, social, community, and private fields. And finally, building safe peaceful environments for girls, women, and adolescents. This is the agenda we'll be working on during the next 6 years. And this came after a national agreement for equality between men and women that was signed by our President Obrador. And I'd like to now give you an example of how this is being made concrete. For example, there are policies that have to do with economic growth. There's a lot of clarity and commitment in that. In order to grow, as the Vice President well said, in order to grow, women must be included in the labor market. This is extremely important for the National Institute of Women, and it is also a priority for the Finance Ministry, for the Labor Secretary of Economy and Well-being. Thus, we are working in more concrete things that will permit women to be a part of the labor market. This requires the creation of national care system. It requires new opportunities as well as financial instruments focusing women. Government then, the government's procurement system will be a new way to encourage this participation. We must also take advantage of the labor 4.0 revolution so that we must get more women to be part of it. We are also taking back much of the contribution for this conference that will be essential for the debate that we're now conducting at our federal government. We in the government of Mexico are committed not only with not going back on what we has already accomplished, but to continue ahead, being clear on what we want, and so that no Mexican women will be left behind. Thus, we realize that part of this commitment includes co-leadership with France, UN Women, the Forum on Equality, and we hope that that will be space for discussion for the creation of new partnerships. So this big step ahead that we must made will help us to go well into the future. We fully believe that only through this joint integrated work, looking at the different interactions, intersections, we will truly be able to accomplish these goals, and that is to change the lives of women and girls in Mexico. Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. You certainly have given us the positive outlook of what is being accomplished in Mexico. The message that we want you to take back home, especially from this forum on equality, is that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we need a more just a system for Latin America and the Caribbean, a better system that will be favoring women with more environmental justice, more symmetries in climate change, so many other topics where often the international community doesn't take heed of what we're doing. So we should take this message of equality for the rest of the world. Thank you, Nadine. I now give the floor to Oscar Urquizy, who is Vice Minister for Equality of Opportunities from Bolivia. You have the floor. Thank you, Alicia. I wish to congratulate you you and congratulate you because you've been a wonderful hostess. In this conference, yes, we have had differences, contradictions, but we also have complete 100% agreement amongst all that we must work towards the equality of women. And that is a commitment that Bolivia has taken up. I greet Colombia's Vice President. Thank you for all of your kind words. We received them well, and I greet then Mr. Platt as well. I congratulate you on your new law that was passed yesterday. It is a great, great step ahead in the agenda that we should follow in all of our countries. We have the penal figure of femicides, but there's so many types of femicides, and we have a gigantic task ahead in this. So congratulate you on that law that was passed yesterday. It's an honor to share this table with wonderful women such as Nadine, Maria Angeles, and Hazel. She has given me her agenda with her photos in Beijing, and it's a privilege and an honor to share this venue with such tremendous, fantastic women who have created tremendous changes in Latin America and Caribbean and the rest of the world. Reaching equality, gender equality, means joining commitments from all and working in the design and implementation of comprehensive laws that will fight gender gaps on a structural level. Changes in education, justice, health, planning, resource allocation. In preventing violence, gender violence, we must have prevention programs that be structural, individual, and collective. I'm talking about a change that is usually seen as primary prevention, primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And in that, we need programs, policies, and mechanisms on structural prevention. We must then change behaviors and toxic action and work on gender roles and developing positive masculinity from the individual up to state levels, from the educational, judicial, communicational systems up to the family, to the classrooms, to unions, individual prevention, strengthening and empowering women with new skills to identify violence, facing them, being assertive. We must know of all experiences that all institutions have faced. We must also work with men so they may develop positive masculinities, exercising a responsible paternity up to co-responsibility, joint responsibility in the care systems and unpaid work at home. Collective prevention, preventing violence as of institutions, organizations, and collectives, but also bringing back and helping out the survivors of violence and getting to make sure that no violence or aggression will be devoid of, will be left unpunished. And we also need protocols against sexual violence, having new reports about the cases that have been already cared for, bringing in new training programs to face violence, to have more equality. We must make a survey on everything that is being done already and looking for the best practices, trying to figure out which should be replicated. Training programs, specializing in some systems, mainstreaming the system throughout all of the operators that have to do with violence, having especially justice officials that are well trained in terms of violence against women, assisting women making sure that they will truly have their rights met, protecting women that have suffered violence. Information tells us that the majority of women who have suffered femicide have already made previous accusations. That means that their protection failed. What are the types of protection measures that are being used to safeguard these women? We must have a new policies. We must have intervention to avoid this toxic male behavior. We realize that the positive change has come about, but we must still redouble efforts in order to get that final goal: equality, gender equality, and the exercise of women to live freely and devoid of violence. We concentrate ourselves and our ideas in the baseline and in the result, when what's really important is in between, how. And figuring out how to change the baseline, giving concrete results, we must work in public comprehensive rules towards equality, gender equality, ensuring for women life free of violence, structural reforms in the judicial system, training in human rights and gender, and getting rid of impunity, empowering women, self-esteem up to her own economy, stop violence from the very beginning through rules and positive masculinity. Everybody who has planted a tree knows that the more difficult thing is to get the seed to sprout. And this is already happening, and we can't go back. Starting is always more difficult. Going to the gym, starting a new diet, beginning with your thesis. In 1977 in Havana, a process that was needed and fair started for mankind. But there's still many other tasks, many other challenges. But you should be proud, you that have such wonderful, strong women have already accomplished so much. In Bolivia, we're fully committed, and it's our first priority to decrease the number of violence and femicides that take place, getting rid of patriarchal. We are all sure that redoubling efforts will certainly be able to see this outcome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice Minister. I now give the floor to Ms. Hazel Brown. I yesterday asked that we all listen to each other, that as we have done this for 43 years, that we watch out for our space. So please let us listen to each other. I now give the floor to Hazel Brown.
Welcome you to our conference, dear Hazel. You have been involved in many projects of research. You have played a very key role in CARICOM, in OAS, in IDB, in PAHO, in UNIFEM, UNESCO, and many other agencies of the UN. So it's really a pleasure for me to welcome you. You are from Trinidad and Tobago, and it's really a great pleasure to welcome you as the head and the coordinator of the networks of NGOs of Trinidad and Tobago. The floor is yours, Hazel.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I'd like to start by thanking UNECLAC and UNFPA for facilitating my participation here, and for the Caribbean Institute of Women in Leadership, of which I'm a member, which continues to do the work that we started in Beijing. I was in Beijing 25 years ago, as I'm sure many of you here were. Beijing and Huairou was about building coalitions and exploring new horizons in a quest for equality and justice. Beijing was about creating a momentum for change in gender perspectives in our region and in the world. The focus was on action, with a renewed vision, a renewed sense of mission. This objective remains unchanged today, even if the challenges and areas of concerns have evolved. Before we address the challenges, however, I wish to emphasize the importance of the contribution that civil society has made to the process of gender equality in the world and the empowerment and autonomy of women from the beginning, because you'll remember some of us were at it since 1975 in Mexico. Indeed, back in 1995, civil society met every day in Huairou, which was a 2-hour bus drive from Beijing. I suppose in those days it wasn't safe to have civil society and governments in the same space at the same time. We did that every day to ensure that we would succeed in consolidating a vision for women's progress on behalf of our Caribbean societies, and we were united and prepared for that task. This contribution was embraced by our government representatives, which resulted in more powerful incomes. The Caribbean civil society is very proud of the contribution that it has made to the success of Beijing. It is important that the value of this contribution not be lost. Our ambition to strengthen the role of women in society was always a collaborative and joint mission between governments and civil society. As we go forward, it is important to keep in mind the need to build and strengthen on this partnership. In my view, the key objectives that must be addressed to develop and implement comprehensive gender equality policies comes in 2 forms. The first is the process, how things work, how things get done. It's about the institutions, the data, then the accumulated knowledge, including the traditional knowledge, the increased institutional awareness and the way in which language relevant to the policies relevant language is expressed. All of these impact the ultimate success of gender policies being designed and implemented. It is also important that in the process of advancing the gender agenda, the voices of key stakeholders, the youth, labor, business leaders, and we've heard a lot about that here, is heard. This is not a decision-making process for government representatives alone. It must be participatory if ultimately it is to impact sustainable development in the region. The second most important objective involves how new areas of concern must be addressed. We need to come to terms with the impact of new technologies and ICT. We didn't have cell phones in Beijing, including social networks and the media and the perspectives and perception on women which are influential in driving change. We must also recognize the need to close the gap between rhetoric and reality. One such way is through the use of our cultural expressions, our traditional cultural expression, because it is important that the delivery of key messages are grounded in the lived experience of our people. We have to make sure and operationalize these policies real to the citizens of our region. We can use this historic moment of Beijing Plus 25 to evaluate what is lagging and how we can guard against regression and achieve transformational change. It is also an opportunity to integrate the agenda of Cairo, the Montevideo Strategy, and CEDAW. The global and regional agendas are mutually reinforcing and interdependent. What then are some of the challenges that have emerged for us 25 years after Beijing and Huairou? We need to ensure inclusive development, shared prosperity as against shared continuing poverty, and decent work equally for both men and women. Poverty eradication, social protection, and the provision of social services for women remain priorities for our region. Indeed, given the high rates of adolescent pregnancy in the Caribbean, the development of strategies to address intergenerational poverty is critical. Freedom from violence in our evolving society has become especially important. Gender-based violence is of concern and requires urgent interventions. For this reason, we are especially grateful for the Spotlight initiative currently being implemented. An emerging and urgent issue for women in the Caribbean is increased exposure and vulnerability to climate and environmental disaster. And yesterday we heard powerful presentations from panelists from Bahamas and the Caribbean states yesterday. Addressing this formidable challenge will require both national and international collaboration to ensure the protection of women and girls. This must be viewed both from a security and a social perspective. Natural disasters result in the impoverishment of women, their families, and communities in the Caribbean. And the highly indebted middle-income countries of the sub-region have precious little resources to deal adequately with the magnitude of social and security needs post-disaster. Migration, trafficking, and refugees is among an emerging area of real concern for the Caribbean. Member states of the sub-region face daily increased demands and obligations to respond appropriately to the safety and security of women and children trapped in these vulnerable circumstances. This formidable challenge requires urgent intervention at the political, social, and community levels, and has far-reaching financial implications for the member states. Regional and international solidarity is a must. Finally, how do we breathe new life into the promises of Beijing? We need to reignite the passion and commitment, and for me, Beijing was a life-changing experience. We need to reignite that passion and commitment to action on gender empowerment that drove the process of Beijing, the Beijing platform 25 years ago. We need to find ways to create renewed awareness among all stakeholders on the return on investment in women and girls, which our region benefits. We need to appeal to a renewed commitment to partnership between the leaders of government and civil society if we are to ensure that gender equality and gender empowerment is to be placed at the heart of the sustainable development process. And we in the Caribbean place great store in the wealth and power of our cultural expressions. We must find ways to harness that power for the advancement of women. This is simply the essence of our way forward. And if you will indulge me, Chairman, I want us to recapture the environment of Beijing 25 years ago, where we sang in that Latin American Caribbean tent. We sang, and my Caribbean sisters will help me if we will sing Bob Marley's "Get Up, Stand Up, Speak Up for Your Rights." Get up, stand up,
speak up for your
give
rights.
up the fight.
Get up, stand
Get
up.
up, stand up.
Don't
Stand
give up the fight.
for your rights. Today is my birthday. I'm 78 years. I am 78 years old today, and it is time for me to pass the torch to the young leaders of today and tomorrow. That is what we mean by intergenerational equality, to ensure that the advancements of women in the region remain a flame that lights the path for sustainable development and ensures the upliftment of all women and girls in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need voices like yours to remember, to make sure that we never forget where we're coming from as well, and how difficult it has been, the journey from Beijing to Santiago, honestly. And when you say that we were not in the same place, NGOs and governments, you're right. And this is what we're trying to gain. We have to be able to be always there. Women have to be there in every place, at every moment. So, Hazel, happy birthday. Thank you for celebrating it with us. It's also the birthday of Minister Pla, so both of you are having a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Tenemos varias de
So, several of us are celebrating their birthday today, so I'm sure we will have a little cake later on. But now I would like to recognize Maria Angeles Duran, our Maria Angeles Duran. Yes, because you are ours, Maria Angeles. What can we do? You're a sociologist, a doctor of political science of the Spanish National Research Council. You've been president of the Spanish Federation of Sociology and founder of the Institute for Studies on Women of the Autonomous University of Madrid, UNESCO, Equality Policy. You've collaborated with UNESCO, the World Health Organization, ILO, and of course, with us. We feel you like, or we see you as a mentor for many of us. Great fighter with more than 200 works on unpaid work, time use, health, women, inequality, and urbanism. You are an inspiration for us, Maria Angeles, so it is we're very proud to have you among us today. The floor is yours. Thank you. And how true it is that the floor is mine, because I have nothing else than the floor. I do not own anything. I have no corporations behind me, nor mass media or anything. But it is true that at least for now, I can still speak. Being able to speak is important. I didn't know exactly how long I would have. I've just published a book 550 pages long. So in 10 minutes, before me, they've said everything I could have said. There's an excellent work here on the autonomy of women and in changing economic scenarios. So I would have to go very much to the heart of the message I would like to leave you with. More than 200 years ago, there were two men who have not been mentioned at this conference. One was called Adam Smith, and the other Francois Quesnay. To most, these names mean nothing, and they do not know that these names are conditioning us, all of us, men and women, because they're the grounds of what has become the modern economy, the dominating paradigm. Adam Smith said in a very famous book, when there were also some very interesting things and good things, and he said that the wealth of nations depends on their ability to sell at a higher price than they are produced. Yes, but there was an error there. He did not realize that most work is not sold, and so it does not become merchandise. And so if you believe that wealth, growth, and development only have to do with merchandise, you are lost. The other writer wrote a few years before. The first was a moral philosopher, but the second was a physician, and a medical doctor, and he wrote that Tableau Économique, and he is the precursor of our current national accountancy. And he made a great contribution, which is to point out, because he knew very well the human body, that if they touch you near, your foot might end up hurting. So everything is connected. But from these first outlines, we've obtained all our major indicators, GDP, for example. I would say, poor man, he was conditioned by his circumstances, but he did not have the intellectual or political skill to include in that circulation goods that did not become money. And so the work of most women did not appear in national accounts right from the start. and are not included in the indicators, and the major economic decisions are made basically in response to major indicators, and that we need them. Yes, of course we do need them because they are very important, but they only tell you half the story. And in some cases, I would dare say that even less than half the true story. I have so very little time, so what can I say? I really liked using here the word depletion, because as you know, life requires something to be depleted for something else to be born. So it's not so bad to say that an economic system, that a system of production and distribution is depleted. I've been working. Well, I'm not as old as Hazel, nor is it my birthday today, but you can imagine that I joined university at the age of 16 and never left it, all the time trying to understand what are the conditioning factors that are day by day, minute by minute, marking my life. And one of these is, how do we determine wealth? How do we determine or define development? And the definitions we have today are not useful. And I say it from the School of Economic Science and a National Award on Social, Economic, and Legal Matters. No, we need new models that account for any small change among the four major productive subsystems, which are the market, households, volunteers, and the state, require very deep transformations. We've been for 5 days saying we want more public services. For example, Nadine was saying this for our children or whatever may be calm because we would like them to join we want to join the labor market. I've calculated for Spain reducing the burden of care in households by 10%, just 10%. If this were done via public services, would require a rise of 70% of the staffing of public services in terms of staff. Well, the volume is so great of what is produced outside the market that any change to that would be totally revolutionary, structural. It's no small change, small adjustment. If we, men and women, but basically women, we're asking for changes. And these changes, we must know, this is not the cherry on the cake. No, these are changes that go to the heart of things. And I would like to say the words, we need to go after the words, because words sometimes are daggers, they're rifles, they are veils that prevent us from seeing reality. Economy is not only the market. Development is not only growth, it is distribution. I'm sure I'm just about to be given the red card like in football match. But I would like to say that in the last years of my work, inventing a new word, it's technical, but it does have a political meaning. You've all heard talk of the peasants and the industrial proletariat, but the caregiving segment comprised of those who, in their productive structure, play the role of providing what the rest of the system does not want to be responsible for, mainly comprised of women, unpaid, and they're the lowest level in terms of rights of their own productive structure, even below the waged workers, because they have no protection for the future when they're elderly. They have no guarantee that in case of illness they may be covered by a health service, because at the end of their days they will depend on the charity and the gift that may be given by others and that often will not be given. And because it is an increasing group, because today on several occasions there's talk of if value were given to unpaid work in households in several countries of the region, this would be equivalent to 22% of GDP or 25 or 21, of course. But that is only supposing that these countries will maintain maintain the demographic structure that they have today. But no, because Latin America has already lost this in many countries. Here, there are still very little women with gray hairs. In Europe, a quarter of the women already have gray hair, if we don't dye it, of course. So, go getting the idea that the time when we could talk of reproductive rights was absolutely necessary, but today we need to talk about the rights of those who are leaving the production, the elderly people, because we're facing new challenges. And if you have it, Cuba have it already. Chile is on the verge of doing this, Argentina as well.
There's a population of older people, and they will not need 22%. They will need about 30, 40. What about TV? Those who aren't in the market, in the labor market, or shall we do something for self-consumption? Because with the pensions, Latin America has weak states with very low social security systems. And what will we do when 25% of older people have not paid their contributions? They have no social security. What will they do? Well, if we don't fix this, we will have to go to care. And we are the ones who would have to do so in the most developed, wealthier sectors of the countries. That care will be in part offered by hiring in terrible conditions women who come from abroad and who are at the minimum level of the labor system. Last year, the most problems came from the paid workers, household workers, because they unionized, they started offering that service. What I can tell you is that we need words of reflection. We need numbers, because all of this is should be before any political decision, and we don't have that. It seems that being the academia is being far, but that's not so. We believe that those who are heading a social movement without new words, without imagination, so that we can understand our world and also the world we want to build. And that was my small contributions. And I give you my last word. A care system should not be a class with the same exclusion, the same lack of correspondence than what has occurred with the farmers. Thank you.
María Ángeles, gracias de verdad.
Thank you, Maria Angeles. With this applause, we are honestly saying we need you. We talk about the care economy, but it shouldn't be the precarious one. And that's what you said. We don't want precarious, proletarian systems. We want a system that will dignify women. So we need you, Maria Angeles, to hand us these words, these figures. You've been already so helpful. And let me tell you, the use of time in the accounts, satellite accounts, and the use of time, this has been done after you already mentioned this, and many of the countries are already doing this. But we do this new frame of mind to imagine the future that we want. So thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to always have you here with us. I now give the floor to Maria Noel Baez, our dear director from UN Women for Latin America and the Caribbean. I think and that it's you're so well known, you don't need any presentation, introduction. It's so difficult to speak up after you did, Maria Angeles, but I'll take the challenge. Thank you so much, Alicia, for hosting us, for your commitment. This has been evident in the preparation and during the conference itself. I wish to thank the Colombian Vice President for her words and example. As the first woman Vice President in Colombia, how long has Colombia been founded? 200 years? Wow, first Vice President woman in 200 years. Amazing. And you've always also told us how to bring in that equality to all ministries and having 60% women at the cabinet. And Nadine, thank you so much for what you told us on what is being done in Mexico. And thank you so much, Hazel, for being here.
After your historic involvement from Redeem to now, and happy birthday also. Y muchas gracias.
And also, thank you, Vice Minister of Bolivia, for continuing this dialogue that we must continue toward equality. So important. We were all saying we must continue with that dialogue. I would like to talk about only 3 themes. The first, you know it, financing for equality. Because words, as Maria Angeles said, words are important, but money is also. And I believe that we must be very clear. Without financing for equality, none of these dreams could happen. So we need to be creative. We need to have innovative mechanisms to finance equality, and we need to challenge our governments to do so. For us, it is essential that women may have income of their own. As Nadine was saying, this in Mexico, this is essential. Their own income means not only self-employment, but equal opportunities, wage equality. We don't have it. Remember, the region has a 25% wage gap. We do not yet have that equality in decent work. And as Maria Angeles was saying, in the care economy that we would like to see in the region, and we would like to be a pillar of our future, what we need is to have social protection in this caregiving. There are opportunities. There are examples of good policies, national care systems, and that we must study them and continue to work on, as in my country that I feel very proud to say, there, yes, we had caregiving, those professional with inclusion. And also strengthening of gender mechanisms created since Beijing. Let's not forget those gender mechanisms that help us at national level to have that dialogue, these public policy for equality, allowing national dialogue. And these care mechanisms have 0.01% of a national budget. We must demand more resources for national mechanisms, and also the social compact that we must take forward towards the Mexico Forum. We must achieve those compacts to be highlighted in our country, in the region, and worldwide. This is the year of equality, and we must push this. Feminist movements, women's movements, international movements, governments, this renewed compact for equality. And third, the deficit that still continues in terms of political participation. We cannot admit anything else other than parity. Parity must be our horizon today. And let's hope that Chile will set the example with the constitutional reform in terms of having that parity. We're all very hopeful. And lastly, for me, it is so important to reiterate that we must continue present as the RCW. We must all be present at the forum in Mexico and the forum in Paris. We must demand our presidents to be at the high-level session of the General Assembly in September. And for that, within our countries, we must work for our presidents to attend with offers and concrete commitments towards the policy of equity. And in October, it will be 20 years since Resolution 1325 of the Security Council, so we must continue fighting so that women in the peace processes may be not only 5%, and that this be done based on equality. I thank all of you for how you've taken part. This conference has been exemplary. If our dialogue is based on respect, this will bring us to that equality that we want so badly. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, María Noel.
Thank you, Maria Noel. Indeed, it has been a pleasure to work with UN Women in the organization of this conference. We still have time left. This is our last session. But we do have time for you, governments, UN agencies, civil society, to express yourselves. Minister Pla and I were saying that rather than listening to another presentation, we would like to hear your words. What do you want for the future? What do you think should come now? We have brought in many ideas. We've said that there is a roadmap, that we go to Mexico, then to Paris. Well, there's CEDAW, then Mexico, then Paris, and then the General Assembly, and we will return then to the region, naturally, because this region is building this process, the thought on women's equality. So it's really, for me, a pleasure to hand out the floor. Guatemala, you're the first on the list.
Muy buenos días. Quiero felicitar a las panelistas por
I'd like to congratulate the members of the panel for these excellent presentations. Today, we had an important thing to say in terms of gender equality. It also means that we should talk about those who prepare and implement public policies, and these, in my country, is in the hands of men. We cannot expect comprehensive policies for gender equality without women's participation. We must go into public spaces and help make decisions. And here, by the way, I'd like to congratulate each minister, public official, civil servant who are here on behalf of their governments in this very important conference. This not only brings in an opportunity to have an impact on women's equality, it also is a big challenge. I also wish to emphasize, and I invite all countries part of this important conference, and as I said on the first days, that we wish to be acting as deserving rights, especially Afro-descendants and indigenous women. As we've already heard here, this is not just something to do with ethics. It's a need for many, many reasons. It's a must, because the makeup of our countries and of our region has the face of indigenous women and Afro-descendants as well. Aside from poverty, hunger, and social inequality, it is this also hits hardly the Afro-descendant and indigenous women in the region. And amongst all of the important topics, I'd like to mention a very important one, and that is deterioration and climate change. Our planet is screaming for help. We're murdering it, and there's evidence enough showing that the Occidental measures adopted are not working. We need to look into the ancestral millenary practices of indigenous peoples where the grandmothers were guardians of the old wisdom. And we also have a great potential to bring in development to our countries and continent. I wish to congratulate the active, proactive participation of our colleagues and civil society representatives from Guatemala who are here present. We have had a very fruitful dialogue as sponsored by UN, especially UN Women in my country, whom I also thank, because without their support, we would not have been able to participate actively in this very important conference. We are committed to work together, starting from the dialogue that we held yesterday. And during this week, we hope that we'll have a shared agenda on behalf of Guatemalan women and of the region. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a Mina Griselda González.
Thank you, Mina Griselda Gonzalez, and we wish to greet Vice President Castillo. And by the way, something that Mina said that is very important for the future perspective, we should look at the traditional wisdom. And we're the only region that has such depth. I'm not saying that others don't, but in our region, we know well that the indigenous people and the Afro-descendant women are the ones that can bring this very interesting perspective. We should include that for the next conferences, indeed. Excuse me for being bold enough to ask again for the floor, but let me say that on Saturday, about 50 business women, indigenous business women, got together on preparation for this conference. And it is an honor to inform that the Network of the Americas for Entrepreneurship of Indigenous Women was created. And there were wonderful indigenous women from all of our countries present. So we'll have more information on that, and we ask you all to back up this project. Certainly, and this can come together with the issue of the cooperatives. That's something very important. Yes, we're jotting down these ideas coming from you. And you yourself said that we should take this all to the next round of regional discussions. Ecuador. Thank you. I'd like to thank ECLAC and the UN organizations that have always had the vision and the generosity to get these spaces to be highly democratic and devoted to an ecumenic lay view. Our states are always being recognized and revitalizing in our democracies. In Ecuador, in a very small community called Ayatputzán, 4,200 meters high, there a group of adolescent women and ancient women decided to secretly set up a small savings account called Michay Biruma. In secrecy, because it's very difficult for a man to allow women to manage their economy, even if depositing just $3 or $5. These women started saving $50. And today, they have already set up the cooperative that manages $4 million. Now, what has been learned by this cooperative? When they started in secret, these 15-year-old ladies, girls, and their mothers and grandmothers who were 7 years old saw that the young girls wanted to marry awfully early when they were 14. And they figured out that this was a way to bring in the new idea and view that they didn't have to marry early, but that they could be independent women through education and through business. This is the 21st century. And the older women said, yes, these girls have to grow up, educate them, get educated, and manage their own money. The young girls decided to make this organization official. And when they did so, they didn't have to be in the shadow anymore. They were made visible. And the men realized that they had been conspiring. And they said, okay, now we want you to lend us money because you have so much saved. And our colleague said, no, you go get together, you make your own cooperative, because we had 5 years work in doing our own cooperative. Nowadays, this is a source of inspiration for many indigenous, rural women, illiterate women from my province and from my country. They are looking for another means to gain political independence and skills. When Maria Angeles talked about development, economy, and profitability, saying that this is not compatible with distribution, and I agree with that, because development looks at these very, very small economies and doesn't really pay any attention to them. They're undermined. But these small economies are the ones that create care, that bring in the ancestral beliefs, creating food security. This is something that we wanted to share with you. These have been moments of deep learning, of a lot of care, but we have a main big challenge that I think should be looked collectively. No public policy. It will be useful if it just stays here in this plenary and with elite thoughts. Public policy will always be meaningful only when it comes down to our cities, to the tiniest corners, such as Tambutapa and others in South America. Those of us who are here are facing this unique, wonderful opportunity, but we have also the big responsibility to go back home with a big commitment in that public policy will be reality. Naturally, a lot of discussion and internal debate will take place, and that is a must. But we must also have in mind a more integrating, comprehensive society with equal relations. I have felt here, and I've noticed that many of the women, especially women such as Hazel Brown, are giving one step ahead, showing the way to many other young people who look at her experience and her knowledge and her path. They see that as an example for life. Welcome, all of you. Let us all be together, women, authority, politicians, civil society, business women. We should get together because we all need each other at the end of the day. We must realize that this economy, the social relationship is of all for all.
Cecilia del Consuelo Chacón.
Thank you, Cecilia Chacón, Secretary of Human Rights.
Esta mirada de que tenemos que ir al terreno a jugarnos lo que aquí discutimos en los pueblos, con la gente, en las comunidades. Así es de que no, muy importante tener sus palabras en esta última sesión. Tiene la palabra Argentina. Adelante.
Gracias. La verdad que estamos muy contentas de haber participado de esta conferencia, de los resultados de este encuentro, que ha sido aquí dentro y también por fuera, poder intercambiar experiencias. Nosotras estamos comenzando, entonces poder tener la experiencia de nuestras hermanas de distintos países, poder estar con Nadine, poder estar con las compañeras de Uruguay, de Costa Rica, de Panamá, poder intercambiar y saber lo que están haciendo para nosotras poder avanzar. Estar acá es un lujo con compañeras que leemos, que nos han nutrido y que realmente es muy, muy valioso. Y escucharlas a
Their own experiences is wonderful, and listening to all of you is wonderful. As Alicia just said, there is a roadmap that we, in our own commitments, will also follow. In this multilateralism, we can be together, we can build on what we have. And we also see paths that we already have in our countries, and that involves many contributions and the difficulties we face every day. We have been speaking a great deal on our native women. We talk about Afro-descendants, about women from popular sectors. In our region, we're going through times where a lot of discussion on equality is being heard, but we've also had step backs, as we've seen amongst many of our indigenous girls. Their tresses had been cut short, they had been battered because of their conditions. But we ourselves should raise our voices. With this pluricultural perspective. This is important, not only as a symbol, but also as part of all of these new paths we must go through. Likewise, I can say that here in the region we have women who have been imprisoned for being indigenous, women who, because they have demonstrated, have been raped or imprisoned. This must also be seen and included as part of public policy, as part of what we should change. When we talk about equality, everything that we have talked about has to do with the mobilization of women with our own diversity. We are enriched by this diversity so that all of this experience may come out. In my country, for example, we have a National Ministry for Women, Equality, and Diversity, and this ministry is committed to work seriously in care policies, in policies for equality, for diversity, because this is the only way to get rid of the deep injustices that are deep-rooted in our countries, as well as violence against women. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this meeting. Thank you, Cecilia Marchand. It was a pleasure having you as Secretary on the Ministry for Equality and Diversity in the new Argentinian ministry recently created. We also had the honor of having here with us Minister Alicia Gomez. It is very positive to follow up what's going to happen with that new ministry. We want to be part of the process. So thank you much for being here.
I will now recognize Spain. The delegate has asked for the floor. The woman delegate will be speaking, not the gentleman. Good morning, everyone, and I would truly, as part of the Spanish delegation and on behalf of the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation, I would like to truly thank ECLAC for the opportunity you've given us in these days to share the reflections at this conference, and of course, and thank UN Women as well as ECLAC for the excellent document produced, which will be a benchmark for everyone. ECLAC and Spain go back a long way in terms of joint collaboration, and that does not but strengthen each other. We've been together in many battles and processes, and at the times when Spain was going through a very deep economic crisis, gender equality policies have continued to be one of our main identity traits. Maybe with less resources, less abilities to accompany the region, but this has been a constant support. I would like to share with you some recent good news in Spain in terms of equality policies that helps us believe that we're entering a very encouraging period. Basically, three main topics. Political participation. We have, in the recent government of a few days, we have parity at cabinet level for 3 vice presidencies, 4 vice presidents, of which 3 are women, in the national parliament, as well as the autonomous community parliaments and municipalities. Congress, as well as the Senate, are chaired right now by women. I think that for us Spaniards, this is excellent news. In terms of the fight against state violence, which is a priority for us in terms of cooperation policy as well as domestic policy, truly we have an instrument that I believe has been emblematic, and that is that in 2018 and with the 2022 horizon, in Parliament we passed a compact against gender violence at a time of great upheaval in Spain at parliamentary level. This was the only time when political parties agreed. And it also seems good news, together with the possibility and the commitment to mobilize €1 billion to support all sectoral policies in protection, assistance, reparation of the victims of gender violence. And the field of economy, care economy, recently, because it was at the end of 2019, a law was passed to balance the permits, the old maternity leave, to the new model of leave to care for children up to 16 weeks for both parents and not transferable between men and women. I think that we're on the right path. Of course, we still have a lot to do. We have this challenge of not taking a step backwards in terms of sexual and reproductive rights, and that is why in the area of international aid for development, we believe that we have very relevant strategic partners in the sphere of the UN. We have agreements with UN Women and also the Population Fund and, of course, ECLAC. I believe that the strategic framework and this collaboration will do no more but strengthen. We have bilateral agreements, and we're working on equality policies and trying to accompany these policies with all government levels. And also we have a tradition in supporting women's organizations, feminist organizations in the region. There's a lot to do, many challenges with a view to these 25 years. In this double soul of Spain, because we're European but also part of the Iberian American community, we believe this double role should serve to supplement agendas, to strengthen them, and, well, with a view to the start of March the 9th, Spain will be in Mexico. And on 9th of March in New York, we can continue to strengthen the equality agenda without any setbacks. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Maria Dolores from ESIT, and I would like to truly thank you because you've been a strategic partner for us, for the Gender Observatory, for violence, for everything that we've done. We have worked hand in hand with you. So thank you very much, Maria Dolores, for accompanying us. It is a pleasure to have you among us. I would now like to recognize the Bahamas.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair. Your Excellencies, no money, no mobilization, no momentum, no impact. And even if you have success in certain areas, then there may not be any sustainability. And so we want all of those. I want to say that I really congratulate what I've seen here this past week. This is my first time. And as I look out of my hotel room and I see the mountains, I recognize that we are in a very sacred space. Sacred to the point where, for such a time as this in the year 2020, you know, when I was little, we used to hear that your vision was 2020, or they would say 2020 hindsight. And so for such a time as this, when we have the awesome grace to live in the year 2020, Madam Chair and Your Excellencies, I really know that the times have shifted toward us achieving these sacred spiritual goals on behalf of the sister countries. I sat in the negotiation draft commitment process, and I really want to say at some points, I felt the heat, and I sensed an impasse, and I'm saying, oh Lord. And I really want to say I witnessed the grace of divinity, decency, and dignity in respecting all of us. And so I appreciate that. And so as you say, the Caribbean sisters, and you elevated us in your statements, I watched it manifest throughout this entire week. And so we are a family. When we go to CSW with those 10,000 women, we are a family, LAC. And so we go as a power block. And so in a family, even as the international conventions and the slogan is no one left behind, no family member left behind. And in some families you have one of the children who is a leader and who's strong and who even could bully the others. And then you have one of the children who is slow. You know, sometimes one who could be stubborn, and then one who really has a disability. But the mother ensures that not one child is left behind as she discerns and determines and diligently seeks to bring parity and equality and equity. And so I sense that with you, with your team. I experienced that because I wasn't coming, and not because I didn't want to, because, you know, there are so many other things in your country that will pull you elsewhere. But for the grace and the generosity of spirit of Lydia Janae, she called and called. She emailed and emailed. Then there were other teams. I think she got tired doing it, and then she set up other women to do it. But it was beautiful because it kept saying, Jacinta, we value you. We want your minister's voice. We want you to be a part of the process, and I am forever thankful that she was persistent and gentle and loving and successful in getting me here. And so I want to ask and say with that notion, no family left behind, no sister country left behind. I want to ask if, as we moved, we only have 9 years, and not even 9 years, because 2030, you can't count that last year, because that last year, we're going to be inundated with trying to do the reports, right? So I'm asking, please, in these 9 divine sacred years, if there is a policy that you recognize that many of the Latin American and Caribbean countries have yet not moved or mobilized on, if there can be almost like a regional carrying, inviting us, we're going to move with this one. We're going to encourage this one. We're going to spend one set of money against this policy. Do you want to be included? Do you want to approach your cabinet? Do you want, so that when you report, you could say 15, 20 countries did this policy. You see, with one money, with one love, one heart. If there is a program that you recognize will really look good on the Latin American and Caribbean hat, the feather in our hat when we present to the General Assembly in 2030, and you want to say, okay, I've noticed that in all of the countries in Latin America and Caribbean, oh, this one is lacking most. Let us see if we can move with this particular program, and then invite us to do it, and then I might even get some money from my own country, or from another little donor that you don't know about, some private persons. But I will say, I don't want the Bahamas to be left behind. Notice what they're doing. So please, Minister, please, private society, can you help us be counted in that number? And then if there are any promotional campaigns, GBV, you know, I heard that in our Caribbean meeting, sexual harassment, you know, I heard that. I heard certain things keep coming up. And so I'm simply asking if we can get a simple checklist of some of the key things you would like to be added to your report, that we can now begin to, have Lydia call them. Or, you know, the other ladies in the office call and say, you want to be a part? So that we can, for 2020, moving towards 2030, we will be beautiful in the spirit of fulfillment of as many of the issues that we want to achieve. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Jacinta Higgs. You have brought to us such inspiring words, I must say. And when you bring us that thought of the awesome grace of being in 2020, that's very powerful, because we're starting a decade. We have little time. And if there's one message maybe that we should bring together to the forefront, I think, is gender equality as a driver of development, of growth, of progress. I think this is, Jacinta. And of course, we want the Caribbean first. We have said it. And we want you to be part of all the numbers, of all the reports that we present to any forum. So thank you, Jacinta. It's a real honor and pleasure to have you with us, together with many Caribbean colleagues and friends that have joined us today. Paso la palabra a México.
And now I'd like to recognize Mexico. Thank you. The best legacy is greater autonomy and emancipation for young women. Alicia Bárcena. This is a message that comes from an entire process for the recovery of the relevance of the world today and different ways that young women are the inheritors of antiquity, because our generation has skin tattooed in memory. The paradox of existentialism, the reason why we are here existing, these are the past futures. 25 years ago, I was born, and at the same time in Beijing, the platform for action was being agreed on, imagining a world where all women and girls may enjoy their rights and options, making a reality of their rights, such as living without violence, going to school, taking part in decision-making, and having equal pay for equal work. We have had achievements. Each and every one has been relevant, but insufficient, and this is the face of the work still to be done. How to explore, without prior references, the scenario of women in a Latin America without violence. Imagine something still in unexplored land is a challenge to collective imagery. Yes, something never seen before. A Latin America without femicide, and that conceives as its greatest wager the eradication of all forms and expressions of violence, discrimination, oppression, and repression of girls and women. A feminist Latin America with countries that have achieved substantive equality, wage equality, social and legal status for all women, with comprehensive public policies, with their appropriate financing in order to respond to all experiences of women, with free parities against the adjustments guaranteeing our sexual and reproductive rights, and so that access to health be safe, legal, and free of charge. Countries that contemplate the redistribution of care with inclusive parental policies based on equality and recognition, formal work of the work done at homes. But how to imagine what is inconceivable, how to patriarchalize the entire continent? I have some certainties, but also many doubts. And I ask myself these things, but I also reflect together with others. We, the millennials, stand before this issue of facing the unheard of, how to be independent with such a historical legacy of colonization, slavery, looting, and stripping away, military dictatorships, forced disappearances, and migration. To see the phenomenon from the logic of power and domination implies understanding ourselves with our vulnerabilities, reivindicating our right to mobilization, to legitimacy of our forms of struggle in order to agree and join efforts with others, us, with regard to our pains and experiences as the survivors of patriarchal violence, because it is based on solidarity that we understand that isolated, separated, or fragmented, we are less able to face that fear that the patriarchism has installed in our bodies, our dignity, for us to not do things and accept that we are victims, which is where we have always been placed. Daring is a political act, and those who dare today say, enough disciplining and corrective violations, because the fault was not mine. It had nothing to do with where I was, nor how I dressed. We are identifying the machinery of extermination, femicide, impunity for the perpetrators. It is disappearance and rape. Latin America, in consideration and approval of the Santiago Commitment and recognizing the leadership of young women, today I would like to say to you, you are not alone, and we will not let you go. They will fall because they will be pushed. We, the patriarchs, we shall push them over. Like fire that walks among us for the fight to transform everything, to enable the conditions to view other possible futures, and so re-enable hope among those who follow, those who are still on the way, who today are our girls. To all of you, power, force, resilience, and solidarity. Thank you.
Clarissa Guevara, thank you so much for your kind words. That came loud and clear. 25 years, that's Beijing's age. We can't fail you or the next generations. We will do everything possible so that this dream may become true, and that we be not object nor victims, that we be subjects of rights. Yes, Clarissa, I think that you have inspired us all. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us, Clarissa Guevara. Costa Rica, you're on. Thank you. On behalf of the Costa Rican delegation, Vice President Campbell, I'd like to thank ECLAC's team. I also wish to congratulate the Chilean leadership that helped us organize this excellent meeting. 25 years afterwards, we cannot go back. We must continue forward. I'd like to thank all negotiators who have allowed us to come to this consensus on Santiago's commitment with substantive, important input. I'd also like to say that one of the messages here is that we must continue looking for creative ways into the future. We must support multilateralism. We will see that in New York, and also on the way to Mexico and Paris. We will be on the way to look for creative ways to make forward on the agenda for women. As to this week, I'd like to mention three things. On the first hand, diversity. Just as the planet needs us to concentrate to save biodiversity, society also wants us to appreciate and value all human groups and diversity that is enriching and that brings in benefits for society. Secondly, the importance of working with all players. It's very important to continue looking for creative ways to work with public-private partnerships to create more jobs, and so that society may take up its own responsibility in the care economy. Thirdly, we should continue working for the women's agenda and its relationship with others, such as on climate change and science and technology. Thank you all. I thank ECLAC, and we congratulate Chile's leadership for this meeting. Thank you, Adriana Morillo. The next step, next speaker, well, the next step will be in Costa Rica, May 25th through 29th in Costa Rica, ECLAC's session period, where we will be bringing the results of this conference. Thank you, Adriana. Three more have requested the floor. Antigua, Bermuda, Canada, and Uruguay will be the third to close this round of comments. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you. Advancing gender equality remains one of the Government of Canada's most important priorities. From appointing the first gender balanced federal cabinet and the first balanced federal budget and the first federal minister fully dedicated to gender issues, to the first to unparalleled investment in women and girls, and our feminist foreign policy, the government remains committed to making progress across Canada and around the world. Canada continues to advocate strongly for the recognition of women's rights as human rights in Canada and around the world so that women and girls can be leaders in their families, communities, and countries. Achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls to meaningfully participate in all economic, social, and political realms will create a brighter future for all. It will help build a better world that the UN Sustainable Development Goals envisions. Gender equality leads to important benefits for people of all genders. It increases economic prosperity, leads to greater health and happiness, promotes peace and security, upholds fairness and justice in our society, and helps create a better country for Canadians and an environment around the world that is one that is very positive for the future. Each of us deserves the opportunity to reach our full potential. When the Government of Canada takes steps to advance gender equality, barriers are removed. I would like to thank thank ECLAC, UN Women, and Chile as hosts for bringing us together for this important conversation. We look forward to work with all of you this year and for years to come.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's really a pleasure to have you with us today. Cheryl Urban, that she is in charge of South America and the Inter-American Affairs. Thank you for joining us. I think it's so important also to have Canada as part of this very important gathering. So thank you so much, Cheryl. Let me turn to Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I take the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Caribbean and to thank ECLAC for what we consider to have been a very impactful week for us. Let me say for Antigua and Barbuda, we have been focusing primarily on issues surrounded to gender-based violence, so much so that we have the Support and Referral Center, which is a one-stop shop, and we are now the piloted jurisdiction by the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court for the first sexual offense court within the Caribbean. We share our experiences, our good practices with our brothers and sisters within the Caribbean and are also available to do so within Latin America. But most of all, we are very grateful that as a high discussion throughout this week has been climate change issues, which is one that has affected our women and girls significantly. Whilst here, on the first day, we had the situation of Jamaica and Cuba, to some lesser extent, having to deal with an earthquake reading 7.7. We have to continue this work, and we cannot do it alone. We have to continue to work to ensure that we do our best to give fair and equal opportunity to our women and to our girls. So on behalf of the Caribbean, we give our commitment to continue to work together with ECLAC and Latin America and to continue to work for gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Samantha Marshall, thank you for bringing us the voice of the Caribbean. And I have to say that I think this conference has been very important for all of us in terms of recognition, reciprocity, respect. We have heard very loud and clear all the problems also that the Caribbean is facing, especially you, the island, the small island development states who have so many problems. So thank you, and I hope to have you always here. So you said many times this is the first time. No, we want this to be the first and not the last. So join us, come, we want you with us. Paso la palabra.
I now pass on the floor to our dear Mariela Mazzotti from Uruguay. Thank you. I asked the floor because Uruguay cannot but speak up in this room, in this space that we appreciate so much. Here, as country, we have learned a great deal. And I can commit our participation into the future. We are now in the midst of a change of administration, and there are state policies, though, that will maintain into the future. And certainly the next director of the Women's Institute will be here in this room and as committed as we have all been. In Uruguay, and for the working team of the Women's Institute, Daniela Telechea, the Foreign Relations Director, who has been here for many years in a row, it seems like this conference is not just another place where we must participate as country, whether they be regional or international meetings. This conference is a vibrating venue. It is powerful. We often get angry here, but we also feel moved. We feel excited because the Regional Conference for Latin America and the Caribbean has indeed accomplished, on the one hand, it has been able to join a group of countries who are part of the region. And I also here wish to emphasize the Caribbean participation. They have been very committed, devoting efforts, expressing their concerns, bringing in their demands. And this, I think, has enriched our regional conference. I can also say this conference is powerful. It is dynamic because it holds and brings in the participation, the words, and we listen. Women's and feminist movements, that is the movement that certainly is leading all movements, being able to now make a fact the protection of girls and women. And this is also very beneficial for when. Let me tell you, I'm the only woman in a family full of men. I am the only woman. I have had male brothers. All of my cousins are men. I have 2 boys, and I have 2 grandsons. And I hope they will be solidary men in the future, committed, politically open, and honestly having in mind the gender equality focus. When we talk about feminism, we talk about a solidary, equal world, recognizing that there are conflicts and contradictions, yes, and that there is an equal distribution of power. And we do hope, as the young girl spoke from Mexico, we hope that in the future this will be a reality for our adolescents and young boys and girls. This is also being expressed by many other countries. It is heard when we talk about women in our organizations, and they say, we women are not the same. They're indigenous, Afro-descendants, women with disabilities, older women, rural women, from grassroots. It's very important to recognize this. And as such, in recognizing our diversity, that we have this strength that feeds governments. I also wish to say that this has a great potential. UN organizations are betting on this multilateral work, in this regional work, in the dialogue between countries. There's a firm bet on us, even though we do have contradictions and conflicts. That is so important. I, therefore, wish to especially thank ECLAC and the Gender Division for the role they have assumed during these days, and for everything they have done in the organization for this regional conference. I also wish to tell you, Alicia Bárcenas, you have the capability to keep this internal democracy. Lucho, Castillo, all of your team. I also wish to say that it's very important that this conference was held now in Chile. I thank Minister Pla for keeping this here, and I wish you success for this conference, and I hope that this will continue with this pluralistic, democratic dialogue kind of conference, recognizing differences but looking for consensus. It's been a pleasure. For Uruguay, having chaired the conference for these years has been an honor. As I said, we leave enriched as individuals, as institutional team, and as country. Thank you. Thank you, Mariela Mazzotti. It's been a pleasure to work with you during all of these years, and I hope that you will continue working for many years into the future with you and Uruguay. Very well. I now have one special request, and that comes from a dear colleague. That's from Cristina, from the Circle of Women with Disabilities, from Dominican Republic. Cristina will now hold the floor. She comes, as I said, from the Circle of Women with Disabilities, Dominican Republic. Welcome. Thank you. On behalf of the following organizations that I will read shortly, hold these words. On behalf of the Circle of Women with Disabilities, SINUDIS from Dominican Republic, and the group Women with Disabilities, Soñada Colores from Guatemala, the Circle of Women and Young Girls from Chile, Foundation Marisabel from Chile, Libertate from Argentina, Alianza por Discapacidades from Dominican Republic. On behalf of all of these, I will read the following manifesto. Women with disabilities claim for a space in Beijing 25. In the framework of the 4th Regional Conference on Latin American Caribbean Women, the women with disabilities have not been visible at all. The little presence we have is evident. Equally obvious is that our participation should be made present in the design of future conferences and the organization of future conferences, because our governments should place us as a priority in their own agendas. This should be done also by other organizations. We do not consider here the declaration of women with disabilities in leadership positions, both public and private. And this was subscribed at the 12th Conference of Party Members of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities from UN. That was widely disseminated. We are quite clear that SDG number 5 will never be reached, not if we remain excluded. In view of this, we request, number one, that the forum, Generation Equality in Mexico and in France, such as CSW in USA, will offer spaces to analyze the many challenges and discriminations and for the advancement of women with disabilities, and that together we prepare few proposals for future inclusive public policies. We also request that UN adopt the necessary measures to ensure the participation of women with disabilities in all regional and international spaces and sectors, recognizing that we are facing so many more barriers, whether they be social, physical, of procedure, and culture for our full participation. We urge the governments to include in their official delegations women with disabilities, thus showing big progress on the way on Beijing Plus 25. That ECLAC, in disaggregating and submitting data on employment and care in an intersectional way, will also consider women with disabilities, remembering that we are women with disabilities who often are also caregivers, that the organizations of feminist movements and women's movements will follow us with solidarity, empathy, without existentialism, but as women, subjects of rights. We also include, then, we should always include women with disabilities. Let us recall that the whole of the 2030 agenda says, leaving no one behind. Alone, we can get faster, but together, we will get there in a much better position. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Christina. It's a pleasure to hear your words and pick up your demand that we should include women with disability to our conference and our work. This is a powerful message. We will take it very much into account. Thank you for your message. Yes, UNAIDS. Thank you. UNAIDS is pleased to greet the chairman of the conference, Isabel Plajarufe, Minister for Women and Gender Equity of Chile, Mrs. Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, and congratulates the organization of this 14th Regional Conference on Women. In UNAIDS, we're honored to be here together with the government, civil society, and UN agencies. And we also greet the entire panel that has shared such important views in this regard. I'm speaking on behalf of Cesar Núñez, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of UNAIDS, and who sends his greetings and regrets not being here. As our executive director said, Winnie Byanyima, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I quote, HIV is not just a disease, it is a matter of social justice, of poverty, exclusion, and negation of rights. Our region has seen progress in terms of guaranteeing the rights of women and HIV, but we still have a long way to go, as we have heard these days. UNAIDS believe it is important to increase the visibility of the challenges of discrimination against women and girls. It is in this sense, it is important to highlight that this includes women in their full diversity, including women who live with HIV, trans women, sexual workers, and the LGBTI population. We must have the political will and support action to address discrimination against women and girls, and we must overcome the legal and economic barriers to have equitable access by women to health and education, and emphasis on comprehensive education with regard to sexuality. We are facing changing economic scenarios, as the report by ECLAC says, and we would like to bring your attention, the attention of government, civil society, and UN agencies in Chile and Latin America and the Caribbean, with regard to state investments in public policy for the prevention of HIV. We believe that these must be sustainable, focused, efficient, and must have communities at the heart, and of course, have the clear gender approach. Thank you. Thank you. And also, Gia Gasper-Taylor from the Caribbean has asked for the floor. Where are you, Gia? Civil society in the Caribbean. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is time for us to take the advice given by Hazel to get up, stand up, speak up for our rights. And we plan to do this now. I'm speaking on behalf not only of myself from the Network of Rural Women Producers, and also as a member of the Equal Equity Forum, but also on behalf of the High Road Commission. As we address this conference 25 years after the Beijing Platform for Action, we want to point out that the economic recipes since the last decade of the 80s, which enrich a few and impoverish the majority, have generated enormous inequality, violence, and exclusion in the well-being of millions of women and men. 25 years from Beijing, Latin America, and the Caribbean, it cannot stand anymore. Adjustments, policies, and requires policies to stimulate growth and reduce inequality. Given this, grassroots women demand the structural changes in the system and financial and fiscal policies that redistribute income and resources following the guidelines and approval by the countries in the Addis Ababa Action, Agenda, and Financing Sustainability Development. We demand to eradicate these prescriptions that have precarious employment, increased informality, generated unjust wages, with poor or non-existent social security, huge unemployment, rates in the formal market, unequal distribution of the care burden, intensification of our working hours, productive and reproductive obstacles to our businesses and ventures, cities divided with housing, public spaces, infrastructure, and public services, precarious, insecure, and non-existent privatization, and cost of public goods, security, and education, and enormous environmental degradation, all of which leads to unsustainable development processes. Therefore, we are calling for radical change of the leadership in formulating and implementing economic and social policies in the region, moving forward as the only solution to sustainable development economics. Such organizing of these grassroots social movements and the impacts that they produce affirm that their leadership is essential in producing a new economic model. This must be built from the social movement, track records in strengthening local economics, producing unprecedented levels of social capital uncounted for in our GDP. That has enabled families and communities to survive the austerity that the system has produced these past 25 years and manage extreme climate risk. The actions led by urban and rural grassroots women, social movements, and Afro-descendants, and indigenous women groups claiming the power and authority of their traditional knowledge and culture, heritage, and organized constituencies to co-decide the development agenda that will transform women's life and living. Their activism illustrated their capacities that lead to food security, local climate adaptation, and resilience building initiatives to reduce women's vulnerabilities and protect these assets, resist the challenge for structural inequalities that produce substandard living and working conditions for women by demanding grassroots response to women in immediate needs, women that take responsibility for ending structural and political violence that threatens women's land, houses, livelihoods, safeties, and rights, and more, and focus their attention on financing women's empowerment and gender equality at the macro and local grassroots community levels. Decentralize public policies, public works, and public budgets that engage the diverse social women movements in the development of planning and programming, and monitoring results and dedicate public investment streams to sustain these processes. These contributions are directly relevant to addressing the structural dynamics outlined in the poverty, intersectionality, climate change, and care economy sections of ECLAC, Economist report, and also model bottom-up strategies for tackling the poverty, violence, and harsh living conditions by grassroots women and struggled against our own communities. The new economic model should impulse the feminine, social, and solidarity economy and popular finances with a development bank, with resources, preferential interest rates, venture capital, technology and land for women, with fair trade practices, cooperative support, recognition of indigenous reciprocity, unrestricted respect for the planet, Mother Earth, and the panacea that valorization of the contribution of these greater positions and political participation in decision-making and the dissemination of culture of privilege inequality. I think one of the areas that I also need to make mention of is the fact that we have talked about climate change all along, but one of the critical areas that impact on the region is the mining industry and the impact of mining on the lives of women. The lives, their land, their livelihood, all of these things are impacted on by the larger companies, and some we have seen in some cases where the women are also murdered as a result of their action. So we need to pay particular attention to the mining industry and bring in this, if not as a new area that we need to look at, but also as to include it, because it is critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gia. Con esto.
And so we conclude this panel. We thank the Vice President, Maria Rodriguez, and all panelists, Maria Angeles, Hazel, Minister. Yes, thank you all very much. Excuse me. Sorry, I didn't know you were asking for the floor. Please, go ahead.
Bueno.
The thing is that we didn't know. Here you need to raise your name tag or something. Well, we rose all together to make sure you saw us. Okay, we see you. We didn't know you wanted to take the floor. Go ahead. Thank you. My arms hurt, but never mind. It was worthwhile. The Latin American network, comprising 14 countries, represents more than 100 women a year, training, empowering us, building awareness against the murders that killers in the police patrol cars in each one of our countries. That's one of the things we do. Also here at this event, after a very long time and with great effort, we were able to research the violation of our economic rights, and we have just presented this at a parallel event, and so we ask our colleague Alicia, we send it to you with the Uruguayan colleague. Sorry, I don't remember your name right now. She's just behind you. To please read it, and that ECLAC may do this more in-depth study in the entire region to show to what extent sexual workers contribute to the GDP, but that does not return in public policy for us. And so that is what I wanted to say. 10 years ago, this veteran is coming here, and now she's 65. 25 years as a militant. As you can see, all colleagues who came on this opportunity are young. And you know why the young ones came? Because they are the ones we are training to take up the baton. Because it is difficult to come to these places. The invisibility is so hard. And so for them to see on their own, that the only way that we are going to be heard is when we shout, when we get angry. It cannot be that at a place where we come and where it says, and all these pretty speeches said by everyone, and then afterwards in practice, this does not happen with us. So we say to you, please, we need to put this into practice. Name us, because the only thing we have our own is our bodies, and we decide with our body to live decently, to do our work, to give opportunities to our children, the opportunities that we, thousands of women, did not have. So do not punish us for doing with our vagina what no one else allowed us to do. Nobody commands us. We decide. We want decency. We want to be treated in that equal way that so much is said about here. We want to be treated with equality. We are people, we are citizens, we pay our taxes, and so we would like you to name us, to consider us, and listen to us, same as everyone else. Thank you. With great pleasure, Lucia Oscuro says to me, of course, we have already this study. We will analyze it with great pleasure, and you will always be very welcome to this space and to take the floor and speak. So, with great pleasure, we welcome you here. And now I return the floor to the chair, Minister Pla, and afterwards we'll thank all panelists. Thank you. Now, before handing over to Luis Yáñez to proceed with the adoption of the Santiago Commitment, I would like to take the floor for the last time at this 14th conference in Santiago and begin by thanking Alicia Bárcena and also Manuel Baeza for the work done by ECLAC and UN Women and the leadership for organizing the 14th session of the Regional Conference of Women, Latin America and the Caribbean. And I especially would like to thank Mariela Mazzotti, Minister for Women of Uruguay, not only for your chair and for your legacy, you've left the bar high, but also this has been a significant advancement for girls and women in Latin America and the Caribbean. I believe truly these are steps ahead. Also, Mariela, I would like to thank you for your profound democratic conviction in the last words you shed at this conference. I believe and I am convinced, not only as chair of this conference, not only as Minister for Women and Gender Equity of the government of Chile, not only as a Chilean, but also as a woman, that one of the factors that will allow us to cross barriers, very high barriers still today, is when we understand that the cause of gender equity, that the condition of girls and women, Latin America and the Caribbean, should be a cross-cutting cause. We need all of us. I said this clearly. This was said clearly by the young representative of Mexico. We are all needed. Some may make mistakes. Some may learn before others. But what we need is everyone, the experience of everyone. And when we fully understand that this must also be part of the feminist democratic vocation, we will be taking many steps ahead and will overcome many barriers. And who knows, perhaps in less time than we think, we will close the gaps and maybe put an end to the pain that for so many decades continue to accompany girls and women in our continent and the Caribbean. I would like to end this meeting by reiterating that Chile is very much aware of the tremendous challenge implied by being the chair of the most important intergovernment body for the advancement of rights of women in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Especially thank you our minister and heads of delegation from the Caribbean, Bahamas, and the other countries. It has been a great pleasure having you all here in Santiago this week.
We are ending a week of debate, reflection, exchanging of experience, and I'm sure that we will all return to our work full of energy, full of new learnings to drive forward with more force than ever our agenda. We leave here certain that we have closer ties among our nations and that the convictions that join us are much greater than the differences that we may have. We know that this 14th session of the Regional Conference of Women in Latin America and the Caribbean is only the beginning of a year that we hope will be historical for the advancement of the rights of women worldwide, bringing our voice to the next meeting in New York to show once again our commitment to close social, economic, political, and cultural gaps that still affect girls and women in our region. And with the special consideration that today we're facing changing scenarios, that was how we were convened at this 14th session. Scenarios affected by unstable economies, climate change, demographic change, which are also important and that are already affecting our countries, but that we know if we do not address them now and here, they will significantly affect women. The agreement that I hope we will confirm in a few moments more, we agree, countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, to further policies and mechanisms to advance, to commit to the inclusion of the gender perspective, intersectionality, interculturality, and rights in policies and programs with financing for sustainable development, adaptation to climate change, and the mitigation of their impacts and the reduction of the risk of disasters. We emphasize the relevance of moving ahead with the design of integral care systems, which has been the major issue at this conference. And from the viewpoint of gender, promoting co-responsibility between men and women and including policies to satisfy the various needs, care of the population as part of the social protection system. We encourage sustained efforts to increase the representation of women, including women with disabilities, in decision-making processes in order to achieve the long-desired parity democracy. We agree to further effective measures to reduce the gender digital barrier and encourage the participation of women in science, engineering, maths, and others to make sure that women are at the forefront of the digital economy. That, among many other considerations, I would also, Alicia, you allow me to say, which are the particular commitments taken on by Chile at this 14th conference and for which we agree to work not only as chair, but especially on behalf of the government of Chile, the promotion of co-responsibility, identifying men as strategic partners for the achievement of gender equality. We agree especially to promote healthy aging. This must be also part of our policies, priority policies when we're facing demographic change. I think that Maria Angeles was very eloquent in saying which is the scenario that we could face if we do not make decisions now.
And we also promise that within the framework of this platform in the next 3 years to encourage technical, political, expert teams creation so that we go forward in gender chapters, leading them to the different trade agreements in the region. We have many of these. Most have gender chapters. We must not only print that in writing, but also that our governments promise to implement them, and especially the women, micro business women, all of the entrepreneurs in our countries know in detail about these articles so that they may truly exercise their right to it, so that the Pacific Alliance and all the trade agreements that have been signed should involve technical and political subcommittees as of today so as to go forward in this. We also promised to urge the private sector to adopt measures on wage gaps that are still very wide. We will then create PPPs in order to get rid of these gaps. We all share the goal. We've done everything possible to reach these agreements. And the Santiago commitment, if approved, is a reflection of that desire to have an innovative view that will go one step ahead in closing all of the gaps that still affect women in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We need political will to do so. And that is in the hands of the ministers, vice ministers, and vice president who are here joined, of the highest authorities that rule our countries. We aim not only to contribute with roadmaps, identifying problems. Our true duty is to mobilize political desire and will. That's a big challenge that we face every day. We therefore should sit down as part of networks with other authorities who also wish to jump over these barriers. The signing of this agreement will be expression of that political will. It will be starting point for a rich, necessary dialogue for the next few years. It will always go above our differences between governments. Outside, millions of women are waiting for this in Latin America and the Caribbean, so that we start, as of today, working in that direction, giving way to a new stage that will leave behind gaps that still prevent millions of women from also being a part of the social, political, cultural development of our countries, and also for their desire and right to be accepted fully and with equality. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair, Madam Chair. We now we'll go ahead to read the Santiago commitment. And by the way, there are two comments on this. You all realize that much has changed from Montevideo until Santiago during these 3 years. Having obtained this commitment is a valuable recognition of this conference. Chilean's chair has made this easier, including all of the delegations in this Santiago commitment. There have been so many stages in this process until a couple of moments ago. Here lies the recognition, the first appeal to the feminist movement that is needed to support the organizations, and that will be on March the 8th. This also includes a lovely problem that we had to solve in just the last few minutes. Several delegations wanted to host the next conference. And there was generosity from other generations. And finally, Argentina, with the newly created ministry, was the chosen one. That is, if it is approved. So I suggest that we submit to your approval and that we approve for acclamation in Argentina for hosting the next meeting. Would that be by acclamation? Yes. Thank you. Maria Noel and Alicia Bárcena wish to hold the floor. I just have 3 words: political will, financing, and a covenant between all, so this will come true. Thank you. We are so enthusiastic. This is lovely. Argentina, you're on. Let me say that aside from very committed with this conference, we're also very, very happy to host in a few years, in a couple of years, the 15th conference. And let me also say that this is very important to host this meeting in seeing all of these countries with such solidarity, these sister nations coming to an agreement without any difficulty is something to celebrate. And this is also a good omen for what is to come in the future. I thank you, Mexico, Nadine, because we were the last runner-ups. Alicia, thank you. These are the final words to thank you all. We have had a very fertile, demanding meeting, but ends in tremendous success. I wish to thank all of the authorities that have been here with us. Minister Isabel Pla, Mariela Malazzotti, Marta Lucia Ramirez. Thank you for granting the opportunity for ECLAC and UN Women to hold this event, to convene it, so that hundreds of people may be in our headquarters. More than 36 delegations, about 365 civil organizations, 14 agencies, funds, and programs, 11 intergovernmental agencies. And this indeed tells us that together we are able to build this space, the only one, the participation of all Latin American, Caribbean countries, as well as civil society and organization in one single room. We don't have to cross many streets to go to the civil forum. Here it is, you and all of our countries and all agencies. And this is something that we've been doing for 43 years. It wasn't like this in 43 years. In Havana, I think there were only men. That is right. Vilma was the only woman around. And it used to be very complicated. Right now, the region has a new status. It calls on us to push ahead with firm steps. And we're quite clear of what we want. What we want is equality. We don't want to be pushed over. What we want is, as Clarissa firmly stated, we want a world without femicides, without violence, with equality in terms of wages and economy. We must change the gender scheme in our countries, ending the patriarchal society. The time has come to bring in parity in all fashions, in all scenarios, getting rid of violence, respecting girls, women, and older women for what we are, for our own capabilities, and not as victims. We are to be respected as working women, as professionals, to contribute with the growth of our countries. In truth, as Minister Pla just said, you must have been very revolutionary. Well, I am still revolutionary. Yes, I admit it. I am a revolutionary woman. And yes, I was always a young girl in a man's world. That is why I received this idea that the patriarch system is a judge that judges us from the moment we are born. I, though, feel reivindicated in this because the women from my generation have found it very difficult. We have been discriminated. We have been despised or undermined. All of us women have lived through this. Certainly, Hazel's generation also went through this. She's out celebrating her birthday, rightly so. But let me say that we are going through a new political era. this social mobilization, the demonstrations out in the streets, is a sign of social evolution, and we must strive for a civilizing change. And the women here have an extremely important role to play in order to reach that deep change, not a superficial change, Mariana, one that will end with the privileged culture and that will open the culture for equality. We must change this. No more mistrust.
Y tenemos que revertir lo que los ciudadanos nos están pidiendo, y es que
And we must revise the development models. It has been exhausted, depleted, and we women are the ones that could do so. Now, in these closing words, I must take the working team, Minister Pla, Estefania Detel, who has supported us from the ministry, our foreign ministry, Gloria Cid, Christian Steter, Carolina Valdivia, who has supported us so much. And I must ask my own team to please stand up. Mario Castillo, Lucio Oscuro, Eliana Baca, Nicole, Diana Rodriguez, Estrella, Alejandra Valdez, Carolina Miranda, Amparo Bravo, Ana Catalina Belén, Marta Del Agua, Valentina Pineda, Carolina Jara, Bettina Schneider, Orlando Kokovic, Francisco Orellana, Paula, Carolina Muñoz, Nicolas, and Hania. This team is not such a large team, not such a numerous team, and they have made it possible together with Luis Llanes, Jimena Arias, the conference secretary, Maria Eugenia Johnson, and her team, our dear colleagues from security who are here with us, our security guards, our colleagues, Ricardo Perez and the editorial team, who only go to bed at 3, so that we have this document already translated, edited for us to sign. Thank you all, colleagues from civil society. For me, indeed, it's an honor and it's a pleasure to have the possibility of hosting you. To the interpreters who have been here with us during all of these days, there they are, our dear interpreters. Thank you all. I also thank UN Women and their fantastic team. Please stand. There's much to be thankful for. But I'd like to close, recalling Patria Minerva and Ana Teresa. Dominican Republic, they talked about liberty, rebellion, and freedom. And these belong to these names, Patria Minerva. And when they were killed, Maria Teresa always said, we risk our lives without thinking about personal benefits. The main reason we fight for is the full cancellation of privileges. Perhaps what we have close at hand is death, but I'm not fearful of that. We will still continue to struggle for what is fair. Here we have your daughters, your granddaughters, and relatives and friends from all colors and ages to fight for what is fair. Thank you.